The following podcast contains explicit language. You're listening to the Cinematography podcast presented by Hot Rod Cameras, a program about the art, craft, and philosophy of the moving image and the people who make it happen. Coming to you from the world headquarters of Hot Rod Cameras in Hollywood, California, are your hosts, Ben Rock and Ilya Friedman.
Hey there, Ben Rock.
Good morning to you, Ilya Friedman. How the heck are you?
I'm living the dream. How are you?
Same here, living the dream.
Hey, who is on the show today?
Today we have Stephen Murphy from Say Nothing, an interview you conducted.
I sure did. It was great talking to Stephen Murphy. It was a great conversation, and it's a great show. If anyone hasn't seen Say Nothing, definitely go try it out.
You mean Say Nothing, not our podcast. I mean, people can say our podcast is great, but not us.
I'm talking about the show entitled "Say Nothing." It's great.
Yes.
It's totally worth your time. Give it a shot. If you're out there hunting around looking for shows, as you know we all do from time to time, give "Say Nothing" a try. You'll enjoy it.
I sometimes think that streaming has brought that feeling that when you would go to a video store with no idea what you were going to get and wander around and then eventually leave with nothing, it's brought that home. It's a real time saver.
Yes, you get that feeling now without having to leave your couch.
And now, close focus.
So Ben, what is our close focus today? What do we have to yak about? What is going on in the industry?
Well, this is an article that I stumbled across in the Hollywood Reporter, but it's hardly new news that right now in Hollywood, production is it's not at an all-time low. I mean, I think probably the pandemic was the all-time low, but it's not increasing to the levels that they had hoped it would post-pandemic, post-strike. You know, here we are. It's is it 2 years post-strike, 1 year post-strike?
2 years.
Yeah.
Well, no, sorry.
It's like a year and a half.
Post strike, yeah, it's a little more than a year. Yeah, year and a half.
So there was obviously a lot of hope that production would tick back up, and it has not. Mostly because I would argue the peak TV era was over. Netflix's oddball distortion of the entire business, putting everyone in an arms race to get more subscribers, cost be damned. Interest rates going up, so money to loan was no longer free, and so here we are, and our lovely sound stages are sitting bare, and it's a bummer. The Ankler, you actually pointed me to an article from the Ankler about basically referring to the LA soundstage problem as sort of a dead mall phenomenon, you know, where it's just like these giant old structures, you know, just sitting there empty. And you know, my feeling in my heart is we're in a contraction, and contractions end, and it'll come back. Will it come back to the level that it was during peak TV? Probably not. That was, I think, kind of an artificial inflation, but it's going to come back to some degree. But this was an article that kind of caught my eye as it was about what someone's doing about it. So TV City, for those of you who don't live in Los Angeles, you've probably seen a shot of TV City. And if you've watched any television in the last 60 years, you've definitely seen stuff that was shot there. Things like All in the Family and the Merv Griffin Show back in the day, Real Time with Bill Maher, like tons of stuff. It is an enormous studio facility. And for those of you who do live in Los Angeles, if you happen to drive down Beverly Boulevard between La Brea and Fairfax, it's kind of hard to miss, right near the Grove. It's a beautiful facility,
right near the farmers market, and also featured in the current season of Hacks. If you've watched Hacks partially takes place there. I remember my first time going to Television City was to see a recording of Rockstar in Excess, the Mark Burnett reality television series. So I was like, yeah, that was a thing. It was kind of fun.
My father, when he came to visit us in LA, he wanted to go to a taping of Real Time with Bill Maher, and we went there, and it's, you know. Definitely, you know, I don't know about old school. Old school would be like the Warner lot or something, or CBS Radford. But it's, it's been around for a long time. Anyway, they have opened up their doors to influencers and content creators like Logan Paul, the much ballyhooed Logan Paul. I'm not a fan of Logan Paul. I'm not a fan of Logan Paul. You know what? I can summarize everything I've seen of Logan Paul's in one sentence. Nothing. I've never seen any of his stuff.
No, you've never seen him fight Mike Tyson?
I saw promos for him about to fight Mike Tyson. That's the most Logan Paul. That's peak Logan Paul for me.
Okay. Well, here's the thing. They're opening up their doors to, I mean, let's be real here. Television City and most of the stages in town, if you have the money, their doors are open to you. It's not like they were excluding influencers. It's not like they were excluding
Well,
YouTubers.
in fact, I don't know if this is still happening because I haven't heard about it in a long time, but for the longest time, YouTube had their own soundstage complex that if you had a certain number of subscribers, they would just let you use it for free. But, you know, these sound stages, I mean, like I've shot a bajillion things on sound stages around LA and they don't ask you what you're doing. I mean, like they ask you for your insurance.
Sure.
You know, they want to make sure your check clears. You know, there might be certain kinds of programming that they're not fond of you making in their soundstage. But for the most part, you know, if you're doing something that's, you know, the normal stuff, a film of some kind, a commercial of some kind, a TV series of some kind, but an independent production of some kind, they're pretty cool. And I would say influencer stuff and, you know, content creators, I hate that word, but
it fits into that mold for sure. But
these people have the money. You know?
Well, a lot of them have money, but not all of them.
I mean, people like Logan Paul for sure has the money.
For sure. But they're also opening them right now to bar mitzvahs. And pickleball. I've heard that there's, you know, such a glut of space right now, and it's a lot of space that deals can be had left and right. If you need a deal on a sound,
makes sense because you'd want to play pickleball in air conditioned comfort. Bar mitzvah is like if you've ever walked into an empty sound stage. It's just a big ass warehouse with nothing in it. I mean, you know, it's designed so that, as the name would imply, outside sound doesn't bleed through. And usually it's got a pretty powerful HVAC system. Other than that, it's pretty dingy looking, you know, without a set in it.
If your bar mitzvah was going to be somewhat like a rave, though, that's totally the type of place I would.
Well, you could go in and you could decorate it. I mean, certainly you could build whatever you wanted, but it's, you know, sound stages are a lot of them are big. You know, I mean, an insert stage seems more bar mitzvah sized for me. As someone who has had a bar mitzvah, I don't think I could fill like one of the big universal sound stages.
Well, my thinking is that. It raves might be the next thing because it might be, you know, parties and events.
Still a thing? Do they still have raves? That seems like so Gen X.
They do. But I mean, have you heard of the Electric Daisy Carnival? That's nothing but a giant rave, really, is what that is. Yeah.
I have not heard of it, but you know, I'm definitely not, I was never, when I was 22, I was never the target demo for anything like that. But yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting that they're opening it up to influencers, but I think that what is happening is, like, I think about the early days of YouTube, you know, like when Funny or Die was a big thing and everything got low tech and people were shooting on mini DV and audiences were seeing fresh new voices. And then what happened? Everything got slicker and slicker and slicker. And now if you go on YouTube and you see original stuff made by people on YouTube, a lot of it's made on, you know, pro quality cameras. And part of the metric of that, as you would know better than anyone, is that great quality cameras have come down and down and down and down in price. So if you're shooting on like the mirrorless DSLRs that we're using for our YouTube channel, those look pretty damn good on YouTube. You know, anyone can kind of afford them if they have, you know, even the most modest budget. But what to me this says is that these people are their production values are going to go up and up and up. And there's plenty of YouTube channels. Like, for instance, my son is obsessed with Dude Perfect, and Dude Perfect started as like a bunch of dudes from Texas doing a bunch of sports crap, and now it is basically a TV show. It has all the production values of a TV show, sound drops, you know, whatever. It has its own format that kind of came out of the phenomenology of them making it for their audience, but it's shot professionally, edited professionally. Those guys are all really fine-tuned on camera, and that goes for all of these influencer types. And to me, it's the slickifying of those people that I'm more interested in, because it's like, okay, if TV becomes less relevant, or, you know, whatever, if these people are the future of entertainment, then are we going to expect more out of them, or do we just want them, you know, filming themselves on their phone?
I think it's interesting too, because a lot of people who have worked in traditional media, particularly reality television, have made the jump over to creator economy and to these large form, largely popular YouTube creators in particular. So, and I just saw, I'm familiar with Darman Studios. They own their own studios. They have 3 buildings out near the Burbank Airport. They're a client of Hot Rod. They employ someone who worked in traditional media and as a CEO, and they are just sort of like rocking and rolling and continuing to raise their production value. It's really interesting to me, this DIY, homebrew sort of technology merging with the professional Hollywood world, and what's coming out of it is stuff that look, there's brand deals and there's money to be had that create paydays for these people on YouTube, but it's very interesting because it is not the traditional business model, and there is some way to make it work. But I think by and large, they are making lots and lots of stuff, and they're doing it less expensive than traditional players, and that's really what it comes down to.
But as these guys move into TV City, TV City might be cutting them a price break, but they're not doing it on the cheap anymore. I mean, like
Correct.
Now they've
Absolutely.
got like a real green room, and they've got a real production bullpen, and they've got real production management, and they've got real cameras. And this is a phenomenon you wouldn't know unless you've worked in a soundstage in LA. But like when you rent a soundstage, you don't bring in your own gear; you rent gear from the stage. So they're probably renting lighting, grip, a camera, electric. I guess electric is lighting, but they're renting all that stuff from TV City. That's my guess. And TV City is going to be getting kind of double dipping. But it's not double dipping. It's a legitimate business. It's the way you run that business. But what's going to happen, in my opinion, is that the influencer economy and the content creator economy, their production values are going to start to rise and rise and rise. And we're going to find ourselves, I think we always find ourselves back in that level where it's like eventually the audience wants something fresh. And then after they've gotten over the splash of water to the face of freshness, they're like, okay, I'd like this to be more professional.
Yes, exactly.
I'd like it to be well made. Yeah. And what that ultimately will mean, I hope, is that, if people, who work in television and movies and stuff are out of work right now, that they'll get hired to, they're going to need sound mixers. They're going to need, lighting technicians. They're going to need DPs. They're ultimately going to need all of these things. If you're going to go into TV City and presumably build some kind of set, then you have to do all the same shit you'd have to do on a TV show or a movie to make that set look right. And if you don't do it, it's going to look goofy, and they're not going to be happy with it. And so, it'll put more, that's my hope. Ultimately, is it gets more people to work. It raises the game of the influencer / content creator people. And, maybe down the line, when we look back at this 15 years from now, like today, we might look at Maker Studios, which was that giant conglomeration of YouTube people that Disney bought for like $1 billion. And then, I don't think it worked out very well for Disney.
With it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But I feel like, these people are maybe going to be able to chart their own course and be in control of their own destiny creatively and professionally, but they'll do it in such a way that, keeps the town working. That, to me, that's, especially right now where there's just such a dearth of work, it would be great to know that, if you're a motion control operator, maybe Logan Paul is doing, some weird motion control related challenge or something on a show. I don't know what his show is. I've never seen it.
I would be sure that as these creators get larger and larger, they are hiring more and more people. So there is more work to be done.
Yep.
Hey, Ben, I think we should get to the interview with Stephen Murphy.
The Cinematography Podcast Interview.
I'm joined now by Stephen Murphy, BSC, ISC. Hey, welcome back to the Cinematography Podcast.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me back.
You were just here a couple of months ago. You spoke with Ben, my counterpart, all about Hard Eyes, this fantastic horror rom-com that you shot. And we've got you back today to not necessarily pick up where you guys left off, but you've been pretty busy. You've done a couple of shows, things that I've watched since that time, including The Tourist Season 2 and Say Nothing, which you basically capped out the series with the last 2 episodes. I want to talk a lot about that this time. So welcome back to the show, and let's dive right in if you're ready.
Yeah, go for it. Great.
Okay, so Say Nothing is a spectacular series. I really, really enjoyed it. It is a little dark. It's a little dirty. It's all about the Troubles. It's a crime, harrowing drama. And I mean, I guess my question for you is, how would you most describe the show? How would you best describe what it's all about? Because there's a real, there's a social impact to it too. How would you describe Say Nothing?
I think Say Nothing is a show that on the surface is talking about the Troubles and all of the, very real horrors that happened in Northern Ireland for a long time. But I think in a modern context, given what's going on in the rest of the world, it has a lot to say about the idea of romanticizing rebellion and how somebody could be, interested in that or attracted to that, and then slowly over time fully come to realize the consequences of what they're doing.
I think that's a great way to put it. And really, the last episode in particular is powerful. It hits home, and it's interesting because it's mostly talking. It's a lot of conversation between the Price sisters. I want to say that probably, which are the main characters, Miriam and Dolours Price. There's one sequence in particular I'm thinking of, which must be at least 10 pages, probably more, where they're sitting inside of a prison, and it's got this wonderful sort of a backlight coming from above. But it is an emotional. It is tense. It is there's moments of levity. When you're faced with a scene like this, when you're like, the weight of the show rests on these long conversations. How do you approach that? How do you decide where the emotional, how do the emotional beats get represented on screen? Is it just a matter of moving in closer, or how do you take on that challenge?
I think for me, it's a question of figuring out a way to get out of the way with the camera, if that makes sense, and not try and impose anything overly stylistic or unnecessarily stylistic on the scene. And a lot of the time, I want to see the scene for the first time almost on the day, so you've read the script. I know what's going to happen. I know the words are, people are going to say, but what I'm trying to see when I look at that first rehearsal with the director is kind of get a little bit of almost like a big bang moment, a little bit of okay, this is the direction it's going in. This is how the performers are taking, the scene on. This is where the weight lies. And so what I'm trying to do visually is, I really love simplicity. And the older I get, the more experience I get, the more I love sort of visual simplicity. And I'm trying to present the scene in a way that is, helping the audience sort of emotionally guide their way through the scene, but also helping them just focus on what's important to the scene and not be distracted by unnecessary showmanship.
And I think that you're right. There's a minimalism, particularly to that scene, that is welcome, and there's a variety of shots. There's a variety of closeness. You've got a 2-shot that's wide, a 2-shot that is tighter, and then you've got dirty over the shoulders where you're in close for particularly tense moments, particularly dynamic, because here are these two sisters that love each other, but there's a lot of contention going on because one of them is essentially concerned that she's ratting her sister out. She's there's a whole what are the repercussions of this conversation and all the things that are going down. It's stunningly beautiful lighting. And I know that when you've got a huge portion of the show, which is, this conversation weighs heavy. And you're not necessarily thinking glamour, like how glamorous do I make my subjects, but at the same time, it's so incredibly beautiful. How do you strike the balance between the reality of prison and the beauty of television and cinema?
Yeah, it can be hard, but I think it's, again, the word I'm sort of maybe scratching at is there's like an elegant simplicity to it, or that's what I'm aiming for. I'm not saying I'm succeeding at that all the time, but there is this thing in art, or certainly in life drawing, where when you start learning how to draw from life, you're putting lots of strokes on the canvas or on the paper to try and describe the form of something. But actually, the people who are incredibly brilliant at it can describe the same form in 2 or 3 lines with beautiful energy and weight and texture. And that's what I'd love to get to. I would love to be able to just describe in as few brushstrokes as possible the real emotional weight of the scene. And some of that is lighting, and some of that is how intimate we are with the camera. I often think of the camera as a listener in those scenarios more than an observer sometimes. And if that was a real conversation and we were 2 benches away or 2 tables away, would we be hearing it the same way? Would we be engaged in the same way, or do we need to be closer? And then you're sort of working with the director to figure out, okay, how much closer? Which doesn't necessarily mean super tight close-ups, but it might just mean wider lenses, but physically more intimate with them. So you're leaning in a little more to listen.
Yeah, it's startlingly great how great that conversation and that whole sequence, because it really kind of sets up a big flashback, which is for basically the entire series, all the hours that have preceded the real mystery of it, of what happened on one particular night. And I don't want to dive too much into it, but if people have seen the show, feel free to issue some careful spoilers here, because they've certainly had time to watch it. But we finally get to see the activities of the night in question. We finally get to see it, and it is dramatic. It is windy, and there's a bunch of flashlights and car headlights and taillights, and really nothing else out in this sort of like this beach sequence. Can you talk a little bit about figuring out how to best capture what is truly the climax that happens right near the very end of this series?
So it's a really interesting sequence because, there is a weight on that scene for all of the reasons you described that everyone is very sensitive to, and everyone wants to really nail the scene. The crew and the cast, we're all very aware of the importance of that sequence. And there's also a sensitivity to the fact that some of the people in that sequence are still alive and will see it, or their families will see it. So, with all of that sort of percolating in the back of your mind, you go into it, as a DP, and you think, okay, there's the physical sort of, things we have to deal with, like the location and access to the location and all that kind of stuff. But you're also then trying to work out with the director, what's the most honest way we can deal with this and portray what happens in the scene, again, without over dramatizing anything, or without sort of being truthful in how we're trying to portray what the book talks about. So in that particular sequence, we've talked. Part of the reason that I think I was brought on for the last 2 episodes is because a lot of the work I do is dark, and it deals with darkness, and I really like, I like darkness more than I like the light, probably. But we knew that both episodes were progressively getting darker towards that moment, and so there was always a conversation about darkness and darkness in general. You have that on every project now. It's how dark is too dark. And Josh, the showrunner, and Mike, the director, they really like darkness as well. So they were really keen to lean into being right on the edge of what we could see, or, sketch things, but not super illuminate them. So with that in mind, and with the sort of logistics of that sequence and where we were going to shoot it, which was on a beach in the south of the UK, which was very visually similar to the real location in Ireland, We ended up having to deal with the weather in a way that we hadn't fully anticipated. So it was a long stretch of dirt road that runs parallel to the beach, and we needed to see that it was a beach, but we also needed to show that this was happening in the middle of nowhere and there was really no light sources. And all of the machines that we put up for lighting, just before we started to roll, had to be taken down because a storm blew in and the winds were too high. So we had to redesign, or I had to redesign really quickly with Sean, my gaffer, how we were going to light the sequence. And we ended up coming up with a solution, which is what you see on screen, which actually worked out far better than my original plan was going to. And it was, again, more truthful. It was probably darker, but I think it worked better for the story and better for the tone and the atmosphere. And we effectively ended up sort of cheating light in, using the car headlights as an excuse to, light the scene and the torches, and then just sketched in as much light as we could to see a hint of the sea and a hint of the surroundings and the dunes, and it worked really, really well. It was very atmospheric, and it also, I think, really helped the scene, helped the performers, because we were working very low light levels, so they did really feel like they were in the middle of nowhere.
I have to say I'm a little bit shocked, actually, to hear you say that, because it is, it looks so intentional. It doesn't look like a storm blew in and you guys had to completely change everything. It looks like, the storm underscores what's happening in the scene. Like the amount of wind, the amount of the tension is so high. There's not a more tense moment in this entire series. And I truly thought that there were Ritter fans, like, oh, we have to see, the seagrass. We have to see the blowing of the wind here. We have to see everyone's hair being tousled. This is the absolute climax of the thing. And there's all of this tension and stuff going on and dramatic music. And you're telling me it's like you guys had to make an adjustment because that wasn't the plan, and that this actually happened, and that was the wind.
That's it. That's one of the realities of working in the UK and you work in Ireland, is you have to roll with the weather. But I think I'm going to say it's Conrad Hall maybe who said something about being able to recognize happy opportunities and take advantage of them. And we were both able to recognize the opportunities and take advantage of it. So, it just took a little bit of readjustment and, a few swear words to get there.
All right. Well, I'm sure that took a lot of extra time to change your plan and to roll with it. But I'm so glad that you did, because that now it's like I can't see it any other way. It's fantastic sequence, and it's ultimately super dramatic, and what a nice capstone for like the whole thing. It's like, by the time you get there, and you finally now know the truth of the story, at least the truth that's presented, that it's almost like you get to now you suspect it for a while, but then to actually see it is almost like this sense of relief, because it's like it goes for so long, and then there's this wonderful sort of like footnotes that you get at the very end. But what how dramatic, and I'd say a real triumph. I want to actually ask you. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. Yeah,
I was going to say the idea of rolling with it is something that I think we end up doing a lot more as cinematographers, maybe than we give ourselves credit for. I certainly think that there is a notion, you start learning as a young DP or you're a young assistant maybe, and you're reading all about cinematographers, and you hear about the plans and, the intention of this, and, blue is going to mean this and this lens is going to mean that. And that's all great and it's all fine. It's all in isolation. But then you hit the ground and, and life happens. You see the scenes. Maybe the scene is totally different. There's been a brilliant idea and someone decides we're going to do it over here instead of over here. And you do need to be able to roll with it and adapt. And I think that's where the interesting stuff comes from. I think certainly I get quite, sort of excited by being able to do something like that, where you still have a plan, you still have the broad strokes, you still have enough equipment around you to make it work, but you're having to redesign things on the fly. And when it works, it's exciting. It's really good.
Yeah, I think so too. That's really where the quote unquote movie magic comes from. It's magic that you guys pull it all off. Okay, I want to change gears a little bit and talk about The Tourist. Now, The Tourist does not have the stakes of Say Nothing. It is a much lighter show. Even though I would say that The Tourist season 2 is a much darker, both literal and figuratively compared to season 1. Is there any sort of connection between The Tourist and Say Nothing for you? Did The Tourist spawn getting the work in Say Nothing? I'm curious, if there's just timeline, because you couldn't really talk about shows that might be more stylistically different, but because it's a Stephen Murphy job, there's going to be silhouettes, there's going to be some low light, there's going to be some stuff that I've come to expect. Right. When I see something that you shoot, can you talk about is there any connection? I mean, did you get to work close to home for both of them? What's any connection at all between them?
Yeah, you're literally close to home. I mean, the first job I'd been living in London for a long time, and I had just relocated back to Ireland and bought a house here. And a director that I've worked with a lot, Lisa McCahey, also lives in Ireland, and she gave me a call and said, "Hey, I'm going to do a couple of episodes of this season 2 of The Tourist. Do you want to do them?" And by coincidence, it was shooting 20 minutes away from home for most of its shoot, and I've never had a job as convenient, to my living situation. So that was a no-brainer. And it's a great, fun show. I've worked with Jamie before. He's a lovely guy. The whole cast was great. Lisa's a fantastic director to work with. And we had a great crew. And it was a really, really enjoyable, pleasant experience, which isn't always the case for every job. But when you're doing something like The Tourist, where it's, you have a lot of fun on it, and you don't quite have the same emotional stakes, doing something like Say Nothing, where every scene is, serious, it's heavy, and every scene comes with a certain weight of responsibility to, authenticity and real life. When you do something like The Tourist, you're not having to deal with each scene with the same drama, and you can have a little fun, which is great. But you can also lean towards, the dark humor that's in it, because it's, as you said, it's very dark, and it's quite, surreal in some spots. So, but it was interesting to go from The Tourist to Say Nothing, because I think that was the year I had them both, almost back to back. Yeah.
There's some levity in The Tourist for sure, and you also get some, if I recall correctly, some stunts and some other sorts of things. I'm not sure if they fall into your episodes specifically, but ultimately the show's fun. It's a fun show. You're not ever really too concerned that your lead character is going to end up in a shallow grave. You're not ever concerned that something really bad is going to happen. It's a fun, sort of actiony, sort of surreal. Yeah, it's how would you describe The Tourist to someone who's never seen the show and is thinking about picking it up?
Picking up, I would say it's definitely different. It's hard to pigeonhole. It's hard to kind of figure out what it is, and I think it probably changes actually as it progresses through each sort of piece of the season. I would have said it's a very dark comedy. But I know plenty of people that would say it's not funny at all, and that they think it's a straight up thriller. So, yeah. But I have a strange sense of humor.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think there's a very dark comedy with some action, sort of mystery about and there's some memory loss, which is always a fun trope to go down. So, okay, so hey. Ben, when you were on the show last time, you and Ben discussed a lot about sort of your background and where you come from in this whole industry, starting off in makeup effects and then moving into essentially VFX school and then apprenticing and working your way up in the camera department and then eventually becoming a DP. I'm not going to cover any of that stuff. I feel like anyone, like you guys had a great conversation. Go back and listen to the episode from March of 2025 to hear all that. But I want to get into a little bit more because I felt like you had a real generosity of spirit with talking about your story and your backstory. And I kind of want to find out your opinion on if someone was starting out in this industry today, if they were listening to that episode and they were like, hey, I'm interested in becoming a DP today in 2025, what advice would you give someone doing this today? Because I can't imagine it would be anywhere near the same as you starting off, 25 years ago or so. What do you feel like would be the path forward? Or would you not recommend someone go into this line of work?
Well, it depends. I think there's easier ways to make lots of money, but the industry is still a really great industry. It's a great job. It's you get to see places that you wouldn't have planned to see, or maybe get to see them in a different way than if you were going as a tourist. You get to meet amazing people. It's a really interesting mix of people that come together in a film set from all different walks of life and backgrounds. And I think the part of the job that I enjoy the most is actually the crew I have around me. It's great making something that's fun. It's great making something that is well received, or, nominated for awards or does well at the box office. But the memories that I will take away from each job is the time I spent with the people on set. So in terms of a path, that's a great question. I think it depends on the person. I think it's a very valid path to still, work through the grades, camera department, or, if you're in the States, the lighting department, or the grip department. I think it's also a very valid path to go to film school and come out the other end and say, hey, I'm a DP. I think the difference is, it's the experience that you'll get along the way. You're going to get a different experience depending on which route you take. And I think it depends on what route suits you. When I was starting out, I was really keen to go to film school. I'd done the makeup thing. I'd been to university and spent a couple of years there. And when I was sort of making the decision to move into camera, I thought maybe I should go back to film school and spend 2 or 3 years there. And I realized, I probably wouldn't have been a great student. It wouldn't have suited me. I had a little bit of experience on the floor as a camera trainee. I was starting to shoot my own shorts, really badly, but still. And I think had I gone back to film school at that point in my life, I probably wouldn't have gotten what I needed out of it. And so I'm glad I continued on the path I took. But I think for someone else who's starting out, maybe film school is the best way to go. Maybe that's the way you need to learn, I would not be great at learning from books or from listening to lectures or anything like that. So my learning tends to be through my fingers, and I need to have hands-on, tactile, touching in order to learn stuff. And that's what suits me best. But there's also a mix. It doesn't have to be a binary, one thing or the other. You could go to film school, you could come out, be a trainee for a while. You could do the other way around. I know plenty of people that worked as a trainee in the UK, maybe became a loader for a couple of years, decided to go to the National Film School, which is a fantastic school, and then came out as a DP. And so you're 30 or whatever, 28, 30, graduating, and, they're maybe more mature and in a better place to take it on. I think the main thing I would say to everyone is understand that it takes time and don't be in a rush. I think you are highly unlikely to pop out of any film school in your mid-20s and be the DP that you think you want to be. I think it's going to take a bit more seasoning, whether you do that through independent filmmaking or working as assistant. That's up to you. But I think it does take time, to get to where you want to go. If you want to be Greg Fraser, you're not going to be Greg Fraser when you're 21. You're going to have to work at it for a while.
I think that's really good advice. And in some ways, this is a leading question, because you and I were talking before I hit record on this episode, just a little bit about the Instagram and the algorithm, because there's a path of person now who I would say is moving into the industry very, very proudly, that they went to YouTube University, that they didn't go to film school, that they didn't have an apprenticeship, that everything they learned they watched online, or they got inspired from watching people post things they shot with their phone on Instagram. So there's this third way now, I want to say, of autodidact, self-taught, methodology that maybe has some value, maybe has less value. But what do you think about the people who are watching and getting their education now for cinematography or for creating visuals primarily from the algorithm, primarily from social media?
It's an interesting third route, maybe, to go. I think I would be my skepticism or my worry about how a lot of us are ingesting media now is, and I include myself in this. I have an Instagram account. I sort of weaned myself off Twitter years ago, got rid of Facebook. I've got an Instagram account which I've just put on pause for the last couple of weeks to see if I can get off it. But I think we are all, as filmmakers, as cinematographers, as people, we're beginning to possibly start consuming the same stuff, and as a result, reducing our, access or our palette, because we're all looking at the same images on Instagram or the same images on ShotDeck. And both Instagram and ShotDeck are amazing tools. They're incredible. But I know it would be interesting to take an experiment if you asked 100 DPs who are doing, sizzle reels or presentations using ShotDeck or Instagram to try and get a job, and to see how common these shared images are between them. I think we're in danger of not broadening our palette, but actually shrinking our palette and what we're being influenced by. And I'd be a little worried if your only learning experience was YouTube or Instagram or something like that. I think you really, you need real life along the way to kind of, shake things up. And I would say I learned as much when I was focusing on trying to be a DP, but I was working as an assistant. I learned as much from gaffers and camera operators and key grips and first ACs about being a DP as I did from DPs. You need that external, meteorite to come in and hit your planet to seed life and get your creative juices thinking in a way that's not just YouTube or not just the particular book that you're reading or whatever.
Yeah, I think a lot. I think a lot about this, actually, just because of the emails and messages that I get through social media from people who are asking questions like this, and I like to try to give them the voice of authority from people who, like yourself, are working in the field and have strong opinions about this. And I think you're 100% right. There's something derivative that when we are all seeing the same images, because frankly, I believe that the major social media platforms want to feed the popular stuff, the stuff that keeps you engaged as much as possible. And I know myself get memes and things sent to me by sometimes a dozen or more people that all tend to be the same thing, that everyone saw the same thing. It all came in their feed. There is something magical and amazing about having worked really, really hard on beautiful, beautiful stuff that you got to see as a DP or you got to see as part of a crew that never makes it to air, ends on the cutting room floor. There is experience and all kinds of value in amazing things that no one ever gets to see. And I feel that the social media-ification of young people coming out, they don't necessarily get the experience. They don't get to see the stuff that didn't actually make the cut. They don't get to see the stuff and understand like why something didn't work or why it wasn't appropriate. They only get to see the highlight reel. I think there's a lot of experience you miss because you don't get the other stuff. You don't get all the other stuff that goes around it. Do you have any feelings about this? Did you ever work on something that you felt was really amazing that might have been heartbreaking then to not see it in the final, but you got all the life experience just because you were there and you did it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that happens on every project, because you're only seeing, working, every day on something and you're shooting it and you think it's great and you shoot it, but you're sort of not seeing it in context the way the director and the editor are going to see it or the showrunner and the director are going to see it. I think it's really interesting when you watch when I see something back, a finished piece, I'm in the grade and I don't realize that there's a whole bunch of scenes missing, because it works really, really well. And then there's other projects where you're doing it and it's, maybe not as well. And you're like, oh, they forgot that scene. Oh, they took that out. Oh. And sometimes, again, you always think, oh, why did they take that out? It was beautiful. The sun was perfect. It's never about the cinematography. It's about the pace and it's about the whole, and that's the difference in what we're doing and what the director's doing. We can sometimes be a little myopic in how we view things, but we got to try and remember that you have to step back and the director's trying to balance everything. But I think in terms of the experience stuff, it's really, I feel, I help with the BSC a lot with the sort of mentorships, and I'm seeing a lot of the kids that are applying, for it. And I think there's a kind of a common thread with a lot of people who are getting in touch, wondering what's the next step. I've just got out of college. What's the next step? I've just shot my short film. What's the next step? And I think a lot of them, could really do with some time spent on sets, any sets, just making forward progress, step by step, rather than trying to make these giant leaps. Oh, I need to have the hit music promo, the hit commercial, the hit indie movie. The first, stuff I did as a DP is awful. It's terrible. I don't want anyone to see it. But it was really good experience. I'm really glad I did it. It's never going to win any awards. I also didn't feel I needed to put it on Instagram or my website, but it's important stuff, it's important learning. It is, it's a big part of the process, but you've just got to take it step by step and not try and make these huge vaults, you're not going to get to shoot June tomorrow or next year or 2 years' time. You've got to just pace yourself a little bit.
I think that's really excellent advice, and that this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. There's a reason why most of the most sought after people who are shooting today have been doing it 20 years. It's it's the overnight success story, 20 years plus in the making.
Yeah.
What's your advice to that person who's wants to pick up a camera, wants to light something, wants to shoot something? How should they go about it?
I would say, again, probably get a mentor. Maybe the thing about mentors is mentorship is really useful when you're at a specific part of your career. If you're, say, you're working away, you're shooting commercials, and you're trying to transition from commercials into narrative, that's a useful time to get a mentor, because then the mentor can actually be of use to you. But if you're like, hey, I've just come out of film school, or I've just started shooting my own shorts, and I don't know what to do next, it's quite possible you're so far away from the advice the mentor or the experience the mentor can share with you that maybe it's less useful. I think it depends on your situation too. I'm a huge fan of Adrian Biddle's work, who's not with us anymore. And I remember reading an article with him years ago when he was still alive, and he was talking about shooting something, I think it was James Bond, and he sort of talked about it like it was a job, just a job. And that was the first time I'd ever heard a DP talk about it in that way. And it kind of switched something in my head. And I think we possibly do ourselves a disservice by, I don't want to say glamorizing, but the role, the cinematographer is kind of talked about in a lofty, kind of incredibly artistic way, which is great. We're all incredibly artistic people, but it's also a job. And I think for a lot of people, it takes them a while to realize that this is a job and I need to pay the bills. Or certainly I did when I was starting. And so if I was offered a low budget feature as a DP, it's not like I have a huge choice as I still, as an experienced DP, I have a choice, but it's not like I'm offered every single feature that's going. So you're still making decisions based on, I need to work, I need to pay the bills, and, I get to do black and white. That could be interesting, but it's a job. And I think you need to treat this career with a little bit of that attitude, maybe not hold it in such a kind of an air of reverence that, I can't take that because actually it's not a good script. Maybe that's the only script you're being offered, and you're going to learn a ton, and you're going to meet a whole bunch of people. Most of the things they don't tell you about in film school, or that you don't read about in magazines about being a DP, are about people management and building relationships, managing a crew, delegating. and just being able to articulate what it is you're trying to achieve. You're not going to learn that I don't think, in film school or, sort of reading books. You need to get out and do it. You need to see other, better, more experienced HODs manage their crews, and you need to steal from them. And you're going to get all of that by just trying to work. So I would say just, take it day by day, treat it like it is. It's a job. And if it's a short and you do your best and you pull in as many favors as you can and you try and do the next thing, and maybe the next job you're working as a first AC or second AC or a grip, you just treat it all with as much, of a professional approach as you possibly can, and just go day by day and step by step, and keep going.
I think that's really great advice, and that's a really great place for us to leave it. Stephen, where can people track you down? If they want to find you on the social media, if they want to find you on your website, how can people look you up?
So my website is stephen-murphy.com, which is still my website. But my Instagram was Stephen Murphy BSC. And I'm probably going to have to reactivate it now if this comes out so I can share this. But I'm not super active on Instagram anymore. I was, but if people really want to get in touch, if they go to the website, they can always send me an email.
Stephen Murphy, thank you so much for being on the Cinematography Podcast. It was great to have you back.
Thank you for having me again. It was brilliant.
All right, so that was Stephen Murphy. Hey, thank you so much for being on the show. I can't wait to see what you do next. Hey, Ben, it is bill paying time. We have to thank our friends over at Aperture, which a huge collection of friends of mine actually do work over at Aperture now. They just keep kind of collecting more and more good people from Ted Sim and, Mitch Gross and Tim Kang. It's like all these people who I've known from various places and various things all keep joining Aperture, which is really interesting. But hey, I want to talk about the Electrostorm lights, specifically the XT26 and the CS15. Both of them are part of this family of high-end professional lights that I don't think get quite enough attention, but they're doing something new on their website, which is they're sort of doing these mini stories about, projects that are using their lights. And one of the ones on here is from friend of the show, Eric Koretz. He shot Ozark and, this new show on Netflix called Ransom Canyon. Ransom Canyon was a hit Netflix show basically immediately. And he kind of goes through his whole process in this sort of real quick breakdown they do of sort of the lighting of Ransom Canyon, where he talks about using the XT26 essentially in exchange for where he would traditionally use 4K HMIs. And I think that's really says a lot about how far LED lighting has come in such a short period of time and how much less power it takes to get a considerable amount of light out. They also used Infinibars and he used a bunch of things, but I want to draw attention to it. I mean, there's other sort of use cases that are up there, but it's worth taking a look at Ransom Canyon. It's worth taking a look at the little story of Eric Koretz. And if you're in the market for an Electrostorm CS15 or XT26, reach out to Hot Rod Cameras. I happen to know that we have a couple of open box CS15s right now that we're looking to move. So yeah, if someone out there in the sound of my voice is thinking, I'd like a deal on one of those, there's some deals to be had over at Hot Rod Cameras. Give us a call and we'll help you out.
And now, short ends.
So Ben, it is our short end time of the show. It's the time when we talk about our pet obsessions. It's the things that we are all about. What are you all about this week?
So I went to see the new Wes Anderson movie, The Phoenician Scheme, and I was texting back and forth with one of my film buddies, a guy named Greg Erb, who's a pretty prolific screenwriter. And after I saw The Phoenician Scheme, which, by the way, I just want to side note, because we've had Bob Yeoman on a few times, and Bob Yeoman shot basically every Wes Anderson live action movie except this one. Bruno Del Bonell shot this one. Looks great. You're not going to be like, oh, it's a whole new Wes Anderson. If you like Wes Anderson, this is exactly you're getting some Wes Anderson from this movie. It's vintage Wes Anderson. Anyway, but I went to see it and I was texting with my friend Greg and I was like, Wes Anderson movies make money, but they don't blow the doors off the box office. And yet he has managed to keep his voice as an artist very intact. Like no one's ever asked him to, I mean, I don't know what people have asked him to do, but he's never made a film that doesn't feel like a Wes Anderson film. He's never, he wasn't, he didn't get to do any of the MCU films. Like he just does his thing and he does it to absolute perfection every time. And my friend Greg texted me a Vanity Fair article from not that long ago. I guess it was just from May. And it was about a guy named Stephen Rails. Are you familiar with Stephen Rails?
I am not.
So this story kind of blew my mind because Stephen Rails basically is not just the benefactor for Wes Anderson. Like when you see the imprint Indian Paintbrush, that's Stephen Rails, and virtually every Wes Anderson movie is Indian Paintbrush, and he's made he's made money on those, and he's made a lot of movies. He made the Duplass, or he financed movies for the Duplass brothers, for Jason Reitman and Diablo Cody, for David Chase. And this was the bombshell in the story that I was like, I had no idea that this had happened. He bought Criterion.
Oh, interesting.
He owns Criterion, and because he owns Criterion, that also means he also owns Janus Films, because that was owned by Criterion. So I just wanted to say, I complain about billionaires all the time. This seems to be a billionaire who's doing good things for the world, making it possible for classic films like the Criterion Collection to remain being appreciated, making it possible for Wes Anderson to keep making his very unique kind of movies. And again, I'm not saying Wes Anderson movies bomb, but I feel like Wes Anderson his films are controlled by a different weather pattern than the rest of the movie world. If Tom Cruise made a movie for $26 million, which he would never do, and it grossed $80 million, he would be like, oh no, my career's over. But like Wes Anderson is able to make modestly budgeted movies that make their modest money back and satisfy his very specific audience who like what he does. And I'm one of those people. But I just think it's interesting to note that, there's a person behind that, the person behind Indian Paintbrush and as of recently Criterion, Janus Films. Like Janus Films has been around forever. And Criterion, I think, has been around since Laserdiscs, right? I don't remember any Criterion VHS movies. It was all Laserdiscs. But
yeah, I think Laserdisc was the first time I ever saw them.
But I mean, Janus Films, I think, has been around at least since the 60s.
Yeah, it's Janus is definitely prolific as well too. They've released a lot of things. I didn't really get the connection between them and Indian Paintbrush, but this is really interesting. So I appreciate you.
I mean, it actually makes me happy to know that. It makes me happy to know that someone cares about art. Like the complaint leveled at Hollywood is always like it's just about making IP, and I guess Wes Anderson is himself the IP. But his films are just so unique and interesting, and again, they're not for everybody, but that's okay. A specific filmmaker or artist does not need to be for everyone. Anyway, that's enough of that. Ilya, what is your obsession this week?
Government cheese is my obsession. Have you seen Government Cheese?
No, I don't know what this is referring to. Is it actual cheese?
It is not. No, there's a television show currently streaming right now on Apple TV called Government Cheese. I figured I would give it a shot. It's David Oellio, and I didn't know what I was in for. I went in completely blank. Didn't watch the trailer, didn't watch anything. It's shot by Matthew J. Lloyd, who I've sort of been tracking a little bit like over time. He does some really big budget stuff sometimes. He does music videos. The first thing I ever saw him shoot was Robot and Frank, if you ever saw that long time ago.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah,
it's not that long ago.
That's really, well, 2012. That's, what,
was
13 years ago?
Was that 2012? Man, if you would have asked me, I would have said it was like 2018. Anyway.
Let's do the time warp again. Anyway.
Just a side note, Frank Langella has been old longer than most people get to be alive.
That's quite true. Anyway, so Government Cheese. Government Cheese is a little surreal, a little charming, a little unexpected. It sort of has almost this vibrant color palette. It's a period piece. It takes place in the 1960s in the San Fernando Valley, and it looks amazing. It's probably this sort of like late 1960s time period. And the production design, the way it's shot, there's sort of moments of humor that bleed through what it could otherwise be a sort of like drab and sort of sorrowistic, that's not a real word, but sorrowful tale of someone getting out of jail and trying to turn their life around and their relationship with their kids and wife and everything else. But it's a story of an inventor. It's a story of David Oelio's character really trying to have some rehabilitation, some real change, having spent years in prison. And I'm only 2 episodes in, but I gotta say, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed both episodes that I watched, and I'm really looking forward to getting into it. So if you need something new and Say Nothing is not your cup of tea, or maybe it's dark or heavy, try Government Cheese. Government Cheese is like the other end of the spectrum from Say Nothing. So it's fun.
Nice. I'll check it out.
All right. So Ben, that just about does it for this episode. Where can people find you if they want to track you down?
You can find me at benrock.com and also LinkedIn. Those seem to be the most successful destinations from here. I'm also on a lot of the other ones. Feel free to say hello. Ilya, how about yourself? Where can people find you?
They can find me over at Hot Rod Cameras, hotrodcameras.com, and LinkedIn. LinkedIn, if you don't want to do the Hot Rod Cameras thing, you can find me over there. Also, BettyLights.com. Betty Lights is now it's not fully there, but it's the reflector business. It's starting to come, and we won a prize over at Cinegear last week, which was great. We won the Best in Show Product of the Year, so not too shabby. Yeah.
Excellent.
So Ben, who do we have to thank? Who made this show possible?
As always, our intrepid, hardworking producer, Alana Cody, who organizes all this, gets us interviewing all these great people. And, even sometimes people will email me and say, I'd like to be on the show. I always pass them along to Alana, whoever they are.
And then Alana goes, we're not having this person on. So
no, absolutely not. Shot The Empire Strikes Back. Nah.
Yeah, forget this person. Yeah,
sorry, Peter Sushitsky. Nah. So we got to thank her. We got to thank our kick-ass editor, Charlie Nix, who does all the slicing and dicing with his Ginsu knives there and releases this both on video and on audio, which is a lot of work. And then last but never least, we got to thank our composer, Kay Zalatrachi, who composed all the music that you heard on this podcast. Check him out on his YouTube page, Kay's Labs, and watch him repair synthesizers. Still working on making that sound exciting.
It's pretty fun. All right, Ben, you want to take us out this week?
Absolutely. Thank you for tuning in.
This has been the Cinematography Podcast, presented by Hot Rod Cameras. Find your next camera, lens, or accessory on the web at hotrodcameras.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our show on iTunes and connect with us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening.